There is a voice inside every human being that never stops speaking. A quiet voice, invisible, constant. Long before the world sees your actions, that voice shapes them. Long before success appears in your reality, it exists in your mind. Long before your life changes externally, something changes internally. Because human beings do not become what they desire. They become what they repeatedly believe. That belief becomes thought. Thought becomes emotion. Emotion becomes action. Action becomes habit. Habit becomes character. And character becomes destiny. Most people never realize this. They spend years fighting external battles while losing the war within themselves. They blame the economy, their childhood, their bad luck, their circumstances, other people. But beneath every action is identity, and beneath identity is belief. A man who secretly believes he is weak will eventually behave weakly. A woman who believes she is unworthy will sabotage opportunities for love and success. A person who believes struggle defines them will unconsciously recreate struggle even when freedom appears. Because the unconscious mind always seeks familiarity over possibility. That is why so many people remain trapped inside invisible prisons. Prisons made of steel, prisons made of belief. A prison where fear disguises itself as logic. A prison where doubt pretends to be realism. A prison where limitation becomes identity. And the terrifying thing is this. Most people inherit beliefs they never consciously chose. As children, they absorb the emotional atmosphere around them, the fears of their parents, the limitations of society, the insecurities of broken people. If you dream too big, you will fail. People like us never become successful. Money changes people. You are not special. Life is suffering. You must stay realistic. And slowly, without realizing it, those words became internal laws. Years later, the child grows into an adult, still unconsciously obeying invisible programming. This is why two people can face the same opportunity and react completely differently. One sees possibility, the other sees danger. One takes action, the other hesitates. One persists through failure, the other quits after rejection. The difference is rarely talent alone. The difference is belief. Belief is the architecture of reality. Look throughout history. Before the Wright brothers flew, humanity believed flight was impossible. Before Edison created practical electric light, thousands believed failure proved impossibility. Before Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, experts believed the human body physically could not achieve it. Then one person believed differently, and reality changed. Because human civilization itself is built upon belief. Every invention, every empire, every revolution, every masterpiece, all began as an internal vision powerful enough to challenge accepted limitation. The outer world always reflects the inner world eventually. That is why your dominant thoughts matter more than most people understand. Not because thoughts magically change reality overnight, but because repeated thoughts shape identity, and identity shapes behavior automatically. A person who repeatedly says, "I always fail," begins approaching life differently. Their posture changes, their decisions change, their energy changes. Soon they stop trying fully, stop risking fully, stop believing fully, and eventually reality begins confirming the belief they unconsciously rehearsed. Not because fate cursed them, because their mind directed their actions toward the outcome they expected. This happens everywhere. People become loyal to suffering because suffering became familiar. They become addicted to chaos because peace feels uncomfortable. They sabotage success because struggle became identity. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He knew that the unconscious mind governs most human behavior. People believe they are making conscious choices while hidden patterns silently direct their lives. That is why self-awareness becomes one of the highest forms of power. The moment you become aware of your inner programming, you begin reclaiming authority over your life. You begin asking dangerous questions. Who taught me this belief? Why do I fear failure so deeply? Why do I feel unworthy of success? Why do I repeat the same destructive cycles? Most people avoid these questions because Truth is uncomfortable before it becomes liberating. It is painful realizing you have spent years fighting imaginary limitations. It is painful realizing you inherited fears that were never truly yours. But awareness creates freedom. Once you see the chains, you can break them. And the first chain most people must destroy is the belief that they are powerless. Because powerlessness becomes self-fulfilling. A powerless person waits constantly, waits for motivation, waits for permission, waits for confidence, waits for ideal circumstances. But powerful people understand something different. Action creates transformation, not waiting. Confidence is built through movement. Strength is built through resistance. Identity is built through repeated behavior. You do not think your way into a new life first. You behave your way into one. Every repeated action becomes evidence for the mind. If you repeatedly break promises to yourself, your mind learns weakness. If you repeatedly follow through despite difficulty, your mind learns strength. This is why discipline changes identity. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is psychological reprogramming. Every time you wake up early despite resistance, you tell your subconscious mind, I am someone who follows through. Every time you continue working while others quit, you reinforce, I do not surrender easily. Every difficult action repeated consistently becomes self-definition, and eventually the new identity feels natural. This is how transformation truly happens, not through one dramatic moment, but through repeated inner and outer alignment. Most people underestimate repetition, yet repetition governs nearly everything in human existence. A river reshapes stone through repetition. The body transforms through repetition. Languages are learned through repetition. Mastery emerges through repetition, and belief itself is formed through repetition. Whatever the mind hears consistently, it begins accepting as truth. This is why environment matters profoundly. If you surround yourself with negativity every day, your mind absorbs limitation. If you constantly consume fear-driven information, your nervous system internalizes fear. If everyone around you normalizes mediocrity, your standards begin shrinking unconsciously. Human beings are psychologically contagious. Energy spreads, mindset spread, expectations spread. That is why weak environments create weak people, and why powerful environments accelerate transformation. Look at Andrew Carnegie. He surrounded himself with ambitious thinkers. Look at Napoleon Hill studying successful minds obsessively. Look at elite athletes training around excellence daily. Environment influences identity more than people realize. That does not mean you blame your environment forever. It means you become conscious of what shapes your mind. Because if you do not intentionally guard your thoughts, the world will program them for you. Modern society profits from distracted minds. A distracted person is easier to manipulate, easier to sell to, easier to control. That is why so many people feel mentally exhausted today. Their attention is constantly under attack. Notifications, comparison, outrage, entertainment, fear. The mind never rests long enough to hear itself clearly. And without silence, clarity disappears. This is why solitude becomes sacred. When you sit alone long enough, you begin noticing your real beliefs, not the beliefs you pretend to have publicly, the beliefs quietly shaping your behavior. You begin recognizing hidden fears, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of success itself. Yes, even success, because success threatens identity too. A person who spent years identifying as the struggling one may unconsciously sabotage progress because growth feels unfamiliar. The unconscious mind often prefers familiar pain over unfamiliar transformation. That is why growth feels uncomfortable. You are not merely changing actions. You are changing identity, and identity resists death. The old version of you fights for survival, the version addicted to excuses, the version attached to comfort, the version that fears responsibility. Every level of growth requires psychological death. You must release old beliefs to enter new realities. That is why transformation often feels lonely. Because your old identity no longer fits, but your new identity is still forming. You stand between two worlds, one familiar but limiting, one uncertain but expansive. And in that space, many people retreat. They return to old habits because uncertainty terrifies them. But the strongest people learn to tolerate temporary discomfort for permanent evolution. They understand that discomfort is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of growth. A seed must break open before becoming a tree. Muscle must experience resistance before becoming stronger. The mind must confront challenge before expanding. Nature itself honors transformation through pressure. Nothing powerful develops through endless comfort. Yet modern culture worships comfort constantly. Easy entertainment, easy pleasure, easy distraction. People are encouraged to avoid difficulty at all costs. But avoiding difficulty weakens the spirit. A comfortable mind becomes fragile. Small setbacks feel devastating. Small criticism feels unbearable. Small failures feel catastrophic because resilience was never built. Resilience comes from repeated confrontation with adversity. That is why hardship often becomes the birthplace of greatness. Look at Abraham Lincoln enduring repeated failures before leadership. Look at Walt Disney facing rejection after rejection before creating his empire. Look at Thomas Edison failing thousands of times before success illuminated the world. Great individuals are not people who avoided struggle. They are people who interpreted struggle differently. Where others saw defeat, they saw instruction. That interpretation changed destiny, because meaning shapes emotional experience. Two people can experience identical pain and emerge completely different. One becomes bitter, the other becomes wise. One collapses emotionally, the other becomes mentally unbreakable. The event itself is not ultimate reality. Your interpretation becomes reality psychologically. That is why controlling meaning is one of the highest forms of power. If every obstacle becomes proof that life hates you, suffering multiplies. If every obstacle becomes training, strength multiplies. Your mind is constantly assigning meaning, and repeated meanings become beliefs. Eventually, those beliefs shape identity. Then identity shapes your future automatically. This is why your internal dialogue matters so deeply. The way you speak to yourself becomes prophecy. If you constantly rehearse weakness internally, weakness becomes embodied. If you constantly rehearse possibility, courage begins expanding. The human nervous system responds to repeated mental focus. Athletes understand this. Elite performers understand this. Military leaders understand this. Visualization changes performance because the mind responds to vividly imagined experience. That is why fearful people often live inside self-created suffering. They mentally rehearse disaster constantly, embarrassment, failure, rejection, humiliation. Their body reacts as if danger is already happening. Then they avoid action, and avoidance reinforces fear. Soon fear becomes identity. But courage works similarly. A person who repeatedly visualizes growth begins moving differently, speaking differently, acting differently, because belief alters perception itself. You notice opportunities differently when you believe possibility exists. You interpret setbacks differently when you believe growth is achievable. The world externally may remain the same, yet your experience changes because your mind changed first. That is the hidden force shaping human destiny. Not circumstances alone, consciousness. And consciousness can be trained. That is the beautiful truth many people never discover. Your mind is not fixed. Your identity is not permanent. Your future is not imprisoned by your past unless you continue believing it is. The human mind is like fertile soil. Whatever is planted repeatedly begins to grow. Fear grows, confidence grows, resentment grows, discipline grows, weakness grows, greatness grows. The mind does not care whether the seed is destructive or empowering. It simply nurtures what is repeated most consistently. That is why thoughts cannot be treated casually. Most people allow negativity to live inside their minds unchecked for years. They rehearse insecurity daily, replay failures endlessly, magnify criticism, feed fear with constant attention, and then they wonder why anxiety controls their life. Attention is energy. Whatever you feed mentally becomes stronger psychologically. If you feed fear every day, fear expands. If you feed purpose every day, purpose expands. The strongest individuals in history understood this law intuitively. Muhammad Ali declared greatness before the world believed him. Henry Ford believed mass production could change civilization before others saw possibility. Steve Jobs envisioned revolutionary technology long before it existed physically. People called them unrealistic, but visionaries often appear irrational before reality catches up, because belief precedes creation. This does not mean blind fantasy. It means disciplined conviction. There is a difference. Fantasy avoids action. Belief fuels action. A dream without movement becomes delusion. But a vision combined with relentless action becomes transformation. And action is where most people fail. Not because they lack intelligence, because they are emotionally addicted to certainty. They want guarantees before effort, proof before risk, confidence before movement. But life does not work that way. The path appears after commitment. Every extraordinary person in history stepped forward before certainty existed. Imagine if Edison waited until he knew success was guaranteed. Imagine if the Wright brothers waited until critics approved. Imagine if Martin Luther King Jr. waited until the world became comfortable with change. History is shaped by people willing to act despite uncertainty. That is courage, not the absence of fear, movement despite fear. And every courageous action rewires identity. Each time you confront discomfort directly, your mind learns, I can survive difficulty. That lesson becomes power, because fear loses authority once faced repeatedly. Think about how fear works. Before action, fear feels enormous. During action, fear begins shrinking. After action, confidence expands. The prison existed mostly in the mind. This is why procrastination destroys so many lives. Procrastination is not laziness alone. It is emotional avoidance. People delay action because action threatens identity. If they try and fail, their ego feels exposed. If they never try fully, they can protect the illusion of potential. So they wait endlessly, waiting for perfect timing, perfect confidence, perfect conditions. Meanwhile, life moves forward without mercy. Years disappear, dreams decay, potential weakens through neglect, and eventually regret arrives. Regret is one of the heaviest emotional burdens a human being can carry, not because of failure, because of unlived possibility. The pain of knowing you betrayed your own potential. That pain haunts people late at night when distractions fade, because deep inside, the soul recognizes when it has abandoned itself. And the soul always knows you can deceive the world, you can perform confidence publicly, you can pretend satisfaction. But internally, you know whether you are becoming who you were meant to become. You know whether fear is ruling your life. You know whether excuses are controlling your decisions. You know whether you are shrinking to fit environments that cannot contain your potential. That inner knowing never disappears. And that is why self-respect matters more than applause. Applause is temporary. Self-respect becomes identity. When you respect yourself deeply, you stop negotiating with self-destruction. You stop accepting weakness casually. You stop tolerating habits that poison your future. You stop abandoning your standards whenever emotions fluctuate. Because standards define destiny. A person's life rises or falls according to what they tolerate. If you tolerate excuses, weakness expands. If you tolerate distraction, focus disappears. If you tolerate mediocrity, greatness suffocates slowly. But if you raise your standards, identity begins shifting. You begin demanding more from yourself, not from self-hatred, from self-belief. That distinction matters. True discipline is not built through shame. It is built through vision. The strongest people are not constantly insulting themselves internally. They are deeply connected to who they are becoming. That future vision pulls them forward even during difficult moments. Vision creates endurance. Without vision, pain feels meaningless. With vision, pain becomes investment. A man training for greatness interprets exhaustion differently than a man without purpose. A woman building a mission interprets sacrifice differently than someone drifting through life unconsciously. Purpose transforms suffering into fuel. This is why hopelessness destroys human beings so quickly. Not because humans cannot endure pain. Humans can endure extraordinary pain when meaning exists. But pain without meaning creates despair. That is why concentration camp survivors who maintained purpose psychologically survived at higher rates than those who surrendered internally. Viktor Frankl discovered this truth in the darkest conditions imaginable. A person with a reason to live can endure almost any hardship. Purpose expands human resilience beyond normal limits, and belief feeds purpose. When you believe your life matters, you move differently. When you believe your work matters, discipline strengthens. When you believe transformation is possible, energy returns. Belief changes posture, breathing, focus, behavior. That is why repeated belief becomes biological over time. Your body reflects your mind. Stress changes the nervous system. Fear changes hormones. Confidence changes physiology. The mind is not separate from the body. They constantly communicate. A fearful mind creates tension physically. A grateful mind creates calm physically. A determined mind creates energy physically. This is why mental training is not abstract philosophy. It becomes embodied reality. Every repeated thought leaves a trace. Every emotional pattern strengthens neural pathways. What you repeatedly feel and think becomes easier to feel and think again. That is why negative cycles become so powerful. A person experiences failure. Failure creates doubt. Doubt weakens action. Weak action creates more failure. Soon the cycle feels permanent. But the opposite is equally true. Small wins create confidence. Confidence improves action. Improved action creates better results. Better results strengthen belief. Momentum builds psychologically. This is why your environment, habits, and focus must be guarded carefully. Most people allow random influences to shape their mind daily. They consume outrage constantly, comparison constantly, negativity constantly, and then wonder why peace disappears. Your mind absorbs what surrounds it repeatedly. The people you listen to matter. The media you consume matters. The conversations you entertain matter. Everything becomes programming. That is why successful individuals protect their mental environment fiercely, not because they are fragile, because they understand how powerful repetition truly is. Imagine hearing every day for 10 years that you are incapable. Eventually, even a strong person begins doubting themselves. Now imagine hearing every day that growth is possible, discipline matters, and greatness can be cultivated. That message shapes identity too. Words become beliefs. Beliefs become behavior. Behavior becomes destiny. This is why language itself carries immense power. Pay attention to how people speak about themselves. I'm always unlucky. I can't stay disciplined. I'm just an anxious person. I never succeed. These statements appear harmless, but repeated identity statements become commands to the unconscious mind. The mind seeks consistency with self-definition. If you define yourself as weak, your behavior unconsciously aligns with weakness. That is why transformation requires new language internally, not empty affirmations detached from action, aligned identity reinforcement. I am becoming disciplined. I can adapt. I learn through failure. I finish what I start. When these beliefs are reinforced through consistent behavior, identity changes. And once identity changes, behavior becomes natural. A disciplined person no longer relies entirely on motivation. Discipline becomes part of who they are. That is real transformation, not temporary inspiration. Embodied identity. The world often misunderstands successful people because it sees outcomes without understanding psychological foundations. People see wealth but not the years of vision, see confidence but not the internal battles, see mastery but not the repetition. Everything powerful in life is built invisibly before becoming visible. The oak tree grows underground before towering above the earth. A building requires hidden foundations before rising skyward. Character is forged privately before the world ever notices. That is why patience matters profoundly. Weak minds demand immediate rewards. But nature itself moves through seasons. Growth often appears slow before becoming dramatic. Most people quit during invisible progress. They abandon dreams because results are delayed. But delayed does not mean denied. The person training daily may not notice transformation immediately. The person reading daily may not notice wisdom immediately. The person healing emotionally may not notice growth immediately. But repetition compounds silently. Then one day the change becomes undeniable. Suddenly people call it talent, luck, natural ability. They rarely see the years of invisible construction beneath visible success. And that invisible construction always begins in the mind. Every empire rises there first. Every revolution begins there first. Every transformation is born there first, inside belief. That is why your inner world deserves protection. Not everyone deserves access to your vision. Some people project their own limitations onto others automatically. They abandoned their dreams years ago, so your ambition unsettles them. Your discipline reminds them of their excuses. Your courage exposes their fear. Your growth challenges the comfort of their stagnation. So they criticize, not always because they hate you, sometimes because your potential reminds them of what they abandoned within themselves. Do not absorb that energy. Small minds have always mocked uncommon vision. When Van Gogh painted differently, people rejected him. When innovators imagined impossible futures, society laughed. When leaders challenged existing systems, resistance appeared immediately. History repeatedly proves this truth. The crowd is often blind before transformation becomes obvious. That is why conviction matters more than popularity. If your belief depends entirely on external validation, criticism will destroy momentum. But when belief becomes internal, external noise loses power. You stop needing universal approval to pursue your purpose. And that freedom changes everything. Because the moment you stop living for approval, your energy returns. So much human exhaustion comes from performance, pretending, pleasing, adapting your identity to satisfy people who are still lost within themselves. People spend years trying to be accepted by crowds that cannot even accept their own reflection in the mirror. And in the process, they abandon authenticity. They silence their instincts, suppress their ambition, hide their intensity, dim their vision, until eventually they become strangers to themselves. That is the true tragedy, not failure, self-abandonment. There is no greater pain than waking up one day realizing you spent your life becoming acceptable instead of becoming real, because the soul was never designed for imitation. Human beings suffer deeply when they betray their authentic nature repeatedly. A lion, forced to live like a sheep, eventually becomes restless. An eagle trapped underground still remembers the sky instinctively, and the same is true for you. There are parts of yourself waiting to emerge, strength you have not fully touched, creativity you have not fully expressed, leadership you have not fully embodied. But buried potential creates internal tension. That tension often appears as anxiety, frustration, or emotional heaviness, because somewhere deep inside, your spirit recognizes misalignment. You know when you are shrinking. You know when fear is making decisions for you. And every time you betray your deeper truth, self-respect weakens slightly. This is why courage matters so profoundly. Courage is not merely about dramatic acts. Courage is choosing authenticity over approval daily, speaking honestly, pursuing vision despite criticism, protecting your standards despite pressure. remaining disciplined when distraction becomes seductive. These moments appear small externally, but internally they build identity. Each courageous action tells your subconscious mind, I trust myself. That trust becomes strength, and strength changes presence. You can feel it when someone trusts themselves deeply. They move differently, speak differently, decide differently, not because they believe they are perfect, because they are no longer at war with themselves constantly. Inner conflict drains human energy faster than almost anything else. The person who constantly doubts every decision becomes exhausted. The person who seeks validation for every action becomes dependent. The person who fears judgment loses spontaneity completely. But a person aligned internally becomes powerful. Not loud, grounded. There is a calm intensity about individuals who know who they are. Life still challenges them, pain still reaches them, loss still wounds them, but they remain anchored. And anchoring becomes essential in a chaotic world, because modern life constantly tries to fracture attention. People are overstimulated yet spiritually empty, connected digitally yet disconnected internally, surrounded by information yet starving for wisdom. The mind becomes fragmented, thoughts scattered everywhere, energy divided constantly, and a divided mind struggles to create anything extraordinary. Power requires focus. Sunlight warms the earth. Focused sunlight through a lens creates fire. The same principle applies to consciousness. Scattered attention weakens impact. Focused attention transforms reality. This is why the ability to concentrate has become one of the rarest powers in modern society. Most people cannot sit quietly for 10 minutes without reaching for distraction. Silence feels unbearable because silence forces confrontations with self. And many people fear themselves more than they fear the world. They fear unresolved emotions, hidden insecurities, buried grief, unfulfilled dreams, so they stay distracted endlessly. But distraction postpones growth. It never creates peace. Only awareness creates peace. Only truth creates peace. That is why solitude becomes necessary during transformation, not permanent isolation, strategic separation from noise. Periods where you step away from constant stimulation long enough to hear your own thoughts clearly again. In solitude, masks begin falling away. You notice how much of your behavior was performance, how many of your desires were inherited, how many fears were conditioned into you, and slowly something deeper emerges. Clarity. You begin understanding what truly matters, not superficial status, not temporary validation, not empty attention, but meaning, purpose, integrity, depth. The older and wiser people become, the more they realize external achievements alone cannot satisfy the soul. A person can possess wealth and still feel empty, possess fame and still feel lonely, possess success and still hate themselves internally, because inner reality always shapes external experience eventually. That is why healing matters as much as ambition. A wounded mind often sabotages what it desires most. People destroy relationships because they fear abandonment, destroy opportunities because they fear failure, destroy peace because chaos feels familiar. Unhealed wounds become unconscious patterns. Carl Jung understood this profoundly. He knew that what remains unconscious controls human behavior from the shadows. A person may consciously desire love while unconsciously fearing intimacy, consciously desire success while unconsciously believing they are undeserving. Then they wonder why self-sabotage repeats. The unconscious mind always seeks consistency with core belief. This is why awareness becomes liberation. The moment hidden patterns become conscious, choice returns. You begin catching yourself. You notice emotional triggers before reacting automatically. You notice destructive habits before surrendering unconsciously. You notice limiting beliefs before obeying them blindly. That moment of awareness changes destiny, because between stimulus and response exists freedom. Weak minds react instantly. Strong minds pause consciously. That pause is power. An insult arrives. One person explodes emotionally. Another remains centered and chooses response intentionally. Failure occurs. One person collapses internally, another adapts and continues moving forward. Circumstances alone do not define character. Response reveals character, and response is shaped by internal conditioning. That conditioning can be transformed. This is one of the greatest truths human beings can discover. You are not permanently trapped by your past. Your childhood may influence you, trauma may wound you, failure may scar you, but none of those things must define your future identity forever. The human spirit is astonishingly adaptable. People rebuild after unimaginable suffering, reinvent themselves after devastating loss, rise again after complete collapse. History overflows with examples. Nelson Mandela emerged from decades of imprisonment without hatred consuming him. Helen Keller transcended darkness and silence to inspire millions. Viktor Frankl found meaning inside concentration camps. Human beings possess extraordinary psychological potential when belief aligns with purpose, but most never access that potential because they surrender too early. They allow temporary pain to become permanent identity. A setback becomes I am a failure. Rejection becomes I am unworthy. Fear becomes this is just who I am. No, experiences are not identity. Pain is not identity. Fear is not identity. Failure is not identity. They are experiences passing through consciousness. But when repeated emotionally without awareness, they harden into self-definition. That is why emotional mastery matters, not emotional suppression. Mastery, suppressed emotions become poison eventually. Unexpressed anger leaks through behavior. Buried sadness becomes numbness. Ignored fear becomes anxiety. Real strength is not pretending emotions do not exist. Real strength is feeling emotion without becoming enslaved by it. A disciplined mind can experience fear without obeying fear, can experience anger without becoming destructive, can experience sadness without surrendering purpose. That level of mastery creates inner freedom, and freedom is the highest form of wealth. A person controlled by impulses is not free. A person addicted to validation is not free. A person ruled by fear is not free. True freedom begins internally. The ability to direct your own mind consciously, to choose focus intentionally, to choose meaning intentionally, to choose action intentionally. This is why mental discipline is sacred. Every great achievement requires it. No empire was built through distraction, no masterpiece created through laziness, no revolution achieved through weak conviction. Greatness demands concentrated energy, and concentrated energy requires sacrifice. You must sacrifice distraction for focus, comfort for growth, excuses for responsibility, temporary pleasure for long-term vision. Most people avoid sacrifice because they misunderstand it. They see sacrifice as loss, but disciplined sacrifice is investment. The athlete sacrifices comfort for strength. The entrepreneur sacrifices certainty for opportunity. The artist sacrifices ease for creation. Everything valuable demands a price. And life always collects payment eventually. Either you suffer the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. One creates growth, the other creates emptiness. Choose carefully, because time moves regardless of your decision. Years pass whether you act or hesitate. Potential either expands or decays. And one day, every human being must confront themselves honestly. Did I become who I was capable of becoming? That question matters more than almost anything else. Not whether you impressed everyone, not whether you avoided criticism, not whether you stayed comfortable, but whether you fully lived, whether you confronted fear directly, whether you developed your gifts, whether you evolved consciously. Because life is not merely about survival. It is about awakening. Awakening to your potential. Awakening to your responsibility. Awakening to the immense power hidden within human consciousness itself. Most people sleepwalk through existence mentally, repeating routines unconsciously, repeating beliefs unconsciously, repeating emotional cycles unconsciously. But conscious individuals become creators instead of reactors. They stop drifting through life randomly. They begin designing identity intentionally. That changes everything. The moment a person decides consciously, I will no longer allow fear to define me, something shifts internally, not overnight perfection, direction. And direction is powerful. A ship slightly redirected eventually reaches an entirely different continent. Likewise, small internal shifts repeated consistently create radically different lives. One new belief practiced daily changes behavior. New behavior changes habits. New habits change identity. New identity changes destiny. This is why transformation often begins quietly. A decision nobody else sees, a standard nobody else understands, a promise made internally, and then repetition begins. Day after day, choice after choice, thought after thought. Eventually the mind adapts to the new standard. What once felt difficult becomes natural. What once felt impossible becomes expected. Because human beings adapt to repeated identity. The nervous system itself reorganizes around belief and behavior over time. Confidence becomes embodied. Discipline becomes automatic. Focus becomes natural. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Anyone can feel inspired temporarily, but sustained repetition changes the structure of identity itself. That is where real power lives.